So let's begin by talking about education and the importance of it. Please tell us what it's like, what it was like growing up and going to school, perhaps when there was not very many schools up on the North Slope.
I mean, as a young boy and having fond memories growing up, we didn't have a school bus to get on. We had to walk to school as holding hands as family and bearing the elements in the middle of winter and 30 below outside, having our Arctic gear on and walking to school. I mean, and we'd be having fun along the way.
What kind of fun you had?
Playing snowball fights and go sliding when we find a hill, and even if we're tardy,
On the way to school?
On the way to school, and we'd be having fun before we even get to school.
Right.
And then we'd be sitting and trying to learn our English as we were growing up and
in the
classroom, and then it would be daydreaming, looking outside. I would be sliding over there.
These are. It sounds like I would rather be outside than be inside, like most kids, really. How were you able to hold your attention to education?
Oh, I think that was hard. I think I fell behind more times than I did learning, because of my daydreaming, wanting to be outside all the time and trying to catch up with my father at times in terms of his workloads for the day, or doing home chores or being at work out in the field. How come he gets to go out and I'm stuck here in this classroom learning English? But the thing is about it, we were learning the very basics at the time, and I always stated that I first learned Inupiat language growing up. Young kids, but I spoke Inupiat, and then we were sent to school to learn English, which was a second language to us.
Right.
And
so you knew Inupiat.
I knew Inupiat.
Not like a lot of kids, even
because we were spoken to in Inupiat by our parents, our grandparents, uncle and aunts, and everything. The activity as to playing at home and doing things, observant of what was happening with. It was a food item was brought home, watching them preparing it, butchering it or cutting it up, and preparing it for food.
Right.
Yeah, and we had to take part in, because that's how we were taught. But then having to go to school, we were having to be placed on a desk and having to pay attention to start learning all
very different.
Very different, the kind of teaching that they were providing to us, and having to learn how to speak and pronounce words that were foreign to us in a sense. So that was part of my recollection of growing up in the school.
Oh, okay.
I got into trouble for misspeaking a lot of times, and I got punished for it too.
They punished you for speaking Inupiat?
Oh, yeah.
Well, now that certainly has not changed per se, but it's changed somewhat. I mean, I think that it's much more acceptable. Now, you wish your kids learn more Inupiat, right?
Oh, yes, they would. But, we've had to transition from our Inupiat communications, oral communications, to an English communications, because it's part of being part of the United States.
That's right. That's right.
They teach us the English language to become proficient in different settings that we're interested in.
But you've held on to both. I mean, you speak Inupiat about as well as you speak English. That's what I'm saying. You speak Inupiat probably about as well as you speak English, to tell you the truth. I mean, from my listening to you.
I mean, I've had to learn English, and English is a very hard language to learn. Once you speak and get accustomed to speaking it, then there's the different perceptions and understanding of how you want to speak at different levels of whether it be federal government or school teaching or just layman terms. So we've had to learn how to understand English as it's presented to us over time. You may want, when you first got out of grade school, getting into high school, I already thought I knew English. And then our high school teacher was telling us, we're going to teach you the second grade English. I was trying to understand. What do you mean second grade? I'm already in the 8th grade and just got into 9th grade. She was saying that what I'm saying is we're going to teach you the next level of English after going through grade school. Now that you're in high school, there's a little bit differing English that you're going to learn. So learning more words in terms of how perception and definition are in specific words are identified. You know, when you speak in the Inupiat language, it's very direct. There's no buts and ifs. Correct. Yeah.
That's about the only Inupiat word I know. It means yes. Let me ask you this question. As you grew up and went through life, did you ever have a dream about what it is that you wanted to be or do? And did you ever think you'd be sitting in this seat as the mayor of the North Slope Borough? And did education help get you here?
To start, to be like somebody, I'd have to say my father. You know, he was teaching us hunting skills, taking us to areas where we would need to learn more things.
Right.
Camping, you have to be respectful of the resources that you're around, and being mindful of how much time you're looking to spend out in the countryside. If you're going to be out there for 4 or 5 days, you better have enough food for at least 6 or 7 days in the event that you get stranded out there due to weather, unpredictable weather patterns.
Right.
At the time.
And it happens a lot of it.
And it happens a lot. And those were the basic things, the very basic camping adventures and that kind of stuff helped me learn a lot from my father and my aunts, my uncles, taking care of me as a child growing up, shared with other families to learn of their lifestyles and sense and how we help each other.
How does that help you be the mayor?
Today, I wasn't thinking of that at the time I was growing up. I wasn't thinking of being the mayor. I can recall Eben being the mayor, and him and his family, Eben Hobson Sr., him and his family and Rebecca had moved to Juneau because he was a member to the state legislature at the time, and then Johnny Nusangina was another individual that was part of that state legislature, and they come back, and then he was the mayor for several years, and from the time I was thinking about that, the mayor, I said, Eben can take care of it. He's going to be for a long
no idea about being mayor in your mind.
No, I did not have it in my mind. I was wanting to be a hunter, like I said, be like my father, hunting and gathering resources for elders and sharing the resources as we bring them home.
What is one of the favorite things that you learned growing up to do that has informed or helped you in this job?
Respect for our elders, our parents, and our family members. And I think that's the biggest thing, is to have respect for one another, along with building my faith.
Absolutely.
It's building my faith with my mother and my father as we were growing up as children here.
Now at Calvary Presbyterian Church.
Yes.
So your family always been a member.
I can when I close my eyes, I have a recollection of hanging out to my mother's jacket skirt and running behind her trying to keep up, and she's telling me, I'm late, we gotta move fast, I'm late to go into church. So I'd be basically pacing myself at a running pace, and she'd be walking fast, and I'm trying to keep up with her to go to church. And those are the things. And then I had to be like 6, 7 years old.
Wow.
That's what I could remember.
Well, we see some of the kids coming to church now, and we try to at least be patient with them.
Oh, yeah.
You've made several big commitments to help people get training and education.
Mm-hmm.
Tuition waivers at Elizabeth College, residential learning center startup, employment and training opportunities at the North Slope.
Yes.
Well, these are all under your administration as new mayor. Why are you making these commitments, and what do you see the benefit from making this commitment for the future of the Inupiat people in the North Slope?
I think the commitment is to making sure just like I said earlier, our first mayor had a vision at that time. Learning to be self-sustaining, self-governance. Mm-hmm. And without education, you can't get there. You have to be educated in a sense that you comprehend what's happening right before you with the circumstances surrounding you. And from just my observations over time, that's something that was lacking or needed to be elevated in the sense where we were not teaching our young ones to be proficient in carpentry or proficient in electrician.
Let's talk about that in a minute. You seem to feel that trade schools
yes.
are just as important as secondary or higher education. Yeah. Why do you feel that way?
I mean, just from what I see in my observations of how communities operate. When you have a community that could sustain itself, it should be teaching the young ones that there are these trades that are needing to be filled when they get higher and finish school, that they could have a job to go to, in a sense, specific to what their interest is.
A trade, a craft, or something
or
like
teaching.
That. Even if they go to college, even if they get higher education. I know you've been executive director for a while prior to this, your job as mayor, as executive director of the Whaling Commission.
Chairman of the
Alaska Whaling Commission.
Yes.
How has that experience impact on your job as mayor, and how has that experience impacted on the education that some people see as just apart from formal education, but it seems so essential to the people here on the North Slope? Those whaling captains and those individuals who go out during the whaling seasons and the people who serve under them on those various crews, that seems to be a whole education in itself. Yeah, tell me about that and how it integrates into education.
And integrating that with education, it's something that we have to identify with because of how we are managed by our federal government and our state government in terms of what we can hunt and where we can hunt and how we can hunt. These are regulations that have been imposed on us by our governments.
Well, why did the government do that? What was that all about?
And to learn about that, when I was growing up, I wasn't so much into that kind of. I didn't have even interest of reading regulation booklets.
Right.
And then I learned about them, and I started wanting to identify why is it that we're being so regulated that we could only take a number of caribou in one season, or we can only take a number of whales in one season, and that's how things were. I was starting to see that needed to be addressed. That we're being regulated in a sense to where we have to manage the number of animals that we take in for our communities. And that was very unfair on our part of the state and our federal government to put regulations when we had a way of life subsisting before their existence.
Right. And a lot of people agree with you on that. Yeah. But how does what's involved? I've been up here now a couple of years, and I've seen during the seasons, that's a whole process of knowledge and experience and education and training. And even some of the kids would take out a little bit of time out of school.
Yes.
And y'all made allowances for that on jobs.
Yes.
And even in the borough, so people can whale. How important is that, the education that you get from doing that experience? How does it integrate, or how does it affect the education that they receive in the standard school?
I think there's a big difference between the two, because it's hands-on learning for us as subsistence communities, hunters, learning regulations, and that's being taught of us naturally by our parents at home, yet observations, oral communications, teaching us the correct methods and stowing things. And then the education, you take that and bring it in to a level of how you see things moving for you in a positive sense. There's always a negative impact. There's always the positive impact, and there's the level of appreciation from going through these. How do I say it? Cycles and learning observations in trial and error effects that you have to put into consideration in terms of how much you're learning and when to use that information that you learned, and to share it with others as well, because when you just keep it to yourself, it's not going anywhere.
So that's kind of OJT, on the job training, and all the time work that you get out in the field. can you use that when you get into the classroom? Is what I'm really trying to get out. I mean, how does that translate into the discipline that's needed to be on a crew?
Mm-hmm.
The following of the leadership of the whaling captain, knowing what you're doing when you're out there on the ice because it could cost you your life.
Yes.
That sounds like an actor, but I don't really. I've heard a lot of it from you guys.
Mm-hmm.
And how does that impact once you get back in the classroom? I mean, do you just want to be out on the ice when you're back in the classroom?
You have to put in your own mindset that you have to learn how to balance things in a way. You have specific time that you're going to be in the classroom. You stick to the time that you're afforded for the learning and being taught by teachers and having getting that experience of reading, writing, or conducting math or science projects.
Right.
Putting all that effort toward how you comprehend things and making it. And then when you get out of the classroom, how can you apply it when you're out in the field, like hunting, like when you're out whaling?
That's
or
interesting.
Communication.
You got to count the whales. You got to measure them. Would a teacher be compared to a whaling crew captain, or?
He could be, depending on the individual. You know,
as a whaling captain yourself, you have to teach the crew, right?
All the time. The oral communications is the start. You know, we communicate on what you can do and what you're not supposed to do, and when to go ask, and when you're going to be set free, basically free on your own to go experiment and do what your teacher was telling you what to do, and come back with the resource that they're asking for you to go help with. Whaling.
Yeah, that's
when you're told to go out to a whaling crew that harvested or successful in landing a whale, you have to spend your entire time there, help cut up the whale, participating in the activity, and then bringing the share for your crew to distribute among the crew.
And all your math is in there, all your reading is in there. I mean, I guess it's to a certain extent, but the Inupiats also have some unwritten and unwritten communication. I've been the beneficiary of some of that unwritten communication from the Inupiats. Sometimes
unwritten rules.
Sometimes it's the way they look at you. I mean, it's kind of like they'll look at you a certain way. You may not think that you don't get the message, but you get the message.
You'll feel the presence.
Particularly some of the elders and the women and the men. They just look at you a certain way, or nod their head a certain way, and you kind of get the message. You really have supported the school district,
yes.
Both with construction projects as well as when they try new programs. Do you see this as an investment for the future of the borough, and if so, how is that an investment?
It is. I have to say, yes, it is an investment into the future for our children, for the betterment of our children, to give them motivation to come to school, to get educated, to have the teachers being able to come back and to teach the students. You know, we don't really give the appreciation to the teachers that's needed for them. Sharing that with them maybe on a daily basis is something that to show your appreciation of the teacher teaching you as a student, learning from them and sharing that appreciation. They've taken time away from their family to be in that school to help teach. So that sharing some of that appreciation back to the teacher, I think, would elevate them in a sense that this is where I'd like to come back to teach more.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's something. But in terms of the resources expended for the schools, I think that's very important for the school and the students to be able to go to a place to learn.
That's right.
And that's the upkeep of the school.
It's
and
expensive too.
The expansion of the school is something that we're always faced with.
And the cost?
And the cost of that is very expensive. Millions of dollars are expended to each of our schools as they're growing. You know, the gyms in several of our villages have just been remodeled to where they're big enough to hold a size number of students in each of the schools.
Biggest gym? Who's got the biggest gym?
I think the Barrow has
Barrow.
Then the remaining are Cockdovic and Point Hope, Wainwright. They have some fairly good size, recently built, renovated gyms.
Now, is the one finished here? You know, some people say it's not quite finished in Barrow. Some people say it'll never be finished. I want to know, you know, what's going on?
There may be some structural issues over time. I think that in wear and tear of the facilities that
well used, I know that
they get used by the community, and the process of maintenance and operations of the facilities are always costly, and sometimes we don't have all the resource to keep up that maintenance,
right,
and or the professional services that needed to do the repairs.
Right, on a timely manner, particularly
Yes.
in the North Slope.
Yes.
Let's turn to another subject: drugs and alcohol. I know this is on everybody's mind. How does supporting education help keep people safe and healthy? After school or enrichment programs an important part of keeping kids away from alcohol and drugs? And how do you see that happening going forward?
I did, moving forward, keep the children active in different level of sports activities, reading. It doesn't have to be sports. It could be reading books and having open community events to keep the children's minds active in doing other things.
When they get out of school?
Out of school, yes. I mean, I use myself as an example. When I was growing up, I didn't have a parent to go home to right after school because they'd have the seeking employment while we're in school to help with the family growth and resources that were needed at the home. So we'd end up playing outside with our neighbors, being outside of the house and making snow caves and tunnels to play around and playing hide and seek in the snow caves, or go sliding on the hills, passing time for several hours until our parents come home, and that would be our pastime. But nowadays it seems like it's a hardship bringing children out when it's 20 below. We don't want them to get frostbite or anything.
Well, the weather does impact on after-school programs, even here in the North Slope.
Yes.
Let me ask, we hear that parents should be involved in the child's education.
Yes.
But sometimes that doesn't always get understood. Do you have any advice or suggestions for how to make that work for families? Most of them who have jobs, and sometimes they get off a little late. And even in the borough, a lot of employers, a lot of people, a lot of employees. You have a lot of employees, and they have to go home to their families and take up the responsibility of making sure their kids do their homework. How do you see making that or improving that situation when the families get off, when people get off of work? You smile. What's you smile?
I'm just smiling. I have to say, adding on the faith, building up the faith, reading from the Bible and sharing that, developing responsibilities, meaningful responsibilities that you're not having to subject the children to negative things, but building up faith and using that as a positive means of looking at their growth and getting them to understand where they are at this time in life. At a young age, I just get so impressed with the comprehension that children have today.
And you got some grandkids, right?
Oh man, I got some grandkids.
How old is your youngest grandchild?
He's going to be 5 soon.
Is that the one that I see with you a lot of times?
Yes.
What's his name?
Dwight is 10. I call him a young man. Right? He was able to follow me up to my camp, which is 130 miles out of here, on a snow machine, and it took us.
He followed you on the snow machine?
He drove his own snow machine for 10 hours.
10 years old?
10 years old.
Wow. And then you have some daughters?
Granddaughter, one, and then 2 daughters.
2 daughters, that's right.
And three. Sadie.
Yes, well, you better get
3 daughters.
You better get that correct, bro. You might have been like that. Oh, they may not like it.
Well, you got me thinking too many things, so I got to think about my own.
Yeah. Think of one of them just finished college, right?
Yes,
and came back to Barrow.
Yes.
What happened? And I know in the fact that you encouraged her to do so, and she probably thought it was a good idea. Why did she? Many of our kids, they finish school and then they move away. She came back.
Why do you think she likes her lifestyle here, growing up with us, and in our family, it's been very close knit and taking them out hunting all the time, and they don't get to do that when they're out elsewhere when they're basically on their own, because they left all their equipment here and trying to purchase things and trying to understand the regulations in different countries, and they're more restrictive than what we see here on the North Slope. It's very different way of life here on the North Slope, and that hunting activities, being able
now,
to.
Does she participate in that?
Oh, yes, all the time.
She's a hunter?
She is. She's got her own rifle. And when she goes out hunting with them.
There are very few daughters that's got their own, well, maybe some in other parts of the country. Many families. She actually hunts.
There's many families that have women that participate in the hunting activities because we're so tight knit. And we sometimes the boys are doing other things, and the young women have to help participate and go hunting.
Sure.
And sometimes they're the sharp shooters of the family, and that's it.
Well, speaking of guns, that's one of the things that's really being discussed nationwide right now with some of the violence in our schools.
Yeah.
What do you all do in the North Slope to educate your kids in gun safety? And that's an education in of itself in a subsistence community where a lot of hunting takes place, and then there are weapons, that have to be properly discharged and put away, and be ready for use at the time. How do you educate your children on gun safety in the North Slope?
I think we start them at a very young age, getting them to be understanding of what the impacts of in the utilization of these guns. They discharge a very fast projectile exiting, and it could kill or injure people if it's aimed at people. So first thing we do, you don't pick up a gun until you've been taught how to utilize it. First thing you do, and the other communications is you never point the gun towards another person. That's very unsafe.
Well, loaded or not?
Loaded, unloaded. It's very unsafe, and it's not a good practice to do that.
What about when you finish using
and when we're hunting, we teach them about being careful, not to aim at any people, making sure there's no other people in the direction you're going to shoot the gun, or if animals between another individual hunting community. You don't shoot at that until you get away in a different direction to prevent that accident from happening. Preventive measures is basically a lot of the communications, oral communication, just sitting side by side with a rifle or gun.
So the guns are usually pointed down.
Or just set aside.
Yes, okay.
And aiming at a different direction, and you don't pick it up until you're ready to hunt.
Interesting.
Yes.
When you're done, how do you? Let's say you come back from the trip and you're done. And so
soon on our way to coming back, sometimes if we're out in ocean hunting, we're sitting next to each other. We tell them we're going to unload the gun so it doesn't get accidentally discharged when we're unloading the gun off the boat. In that sense, and making sure the ammunition, making sure it's clear, no ammunition left inside. You don't go squeezing the trigger with somebody in front of you.
Okay.
You either point it straight up where there's nothing to be aimed at, and releasing the firing mechanism in that sense, and then making sure there's the bullets are stowed away as to where we pick them out of, like a cartridge box.
Yeah.
So
I got one more question for you, Mr. Mayor. We'll be done. On the same topic, Mr. Mayor, is there any advice or encouragement that you would like to share with the audience today? A good piece of wisdom and a kind word which you're known for. Anything that might help build up and encourage communities. We have a couple of funerals coming up. We have the Earl Aiken funeral, which is coming up tomorrow. And then we have the Richard Sakana.
Yes.
His funeral is going to be on the 7th of April. Any words of comfort for the families that are lost loved ones, especially the first responders who responded to a horrific fire and did a good job as best they could, but it's kind of sad. It's got to be sad for your first responders, fire department, and others to be there and can't save a life that they've seen desperately trying to be saved. So what do you say to these families as we close?
I think being close to your family and again, offering prayer. I mean, we have to continue seeking guidance through prayer and developing that communications openness. Sometimes it's even hard to open up to say a prayer at times like these, but I think it's necessary to do that. It's very, it opens up the people's mind that's been involved. I think communications, individuals shouldn't hold things to themselves. They should be open to communicating, so it goes through a process that it helps them retain themselves to where things you will be able to move forward. You know, in the Bible, it tells us that we have to continue praying for each other to strengthen ourselves, whether it's for comforting or if we've been discouraged, that we say prayers to help encourage the individuals to continue doing what they're doing in providing a professional service for the community.
On a more positive note, even though we want to support our families, we think that you've been doing a great job, Mr. Mayor. We're thrilled to have you as our mayor. And of course, you know, it's a year-to-year job. I mean, next year they may hate you. This year they love you. Next year they may hate you. Then the next year they may love you again. So it's always an up and down battle with the challenges you face. But we really want to thank you for the work that you do. It's a thankless task sometimes, but at the same time, I think it's rewarding when you can see the life, particularly in the area of education and investment in the future. Thank you for being with us on Real People.
Thank you, Reverend.